Live now to Sydney. The Shadow Agriculture Minister Joel Fitzgibbon joins me now. Thanks so much for your time, Mr Fitzgibbon. Did the review get it right?
Look, it's a comprehensive report, Laura, and I think a robust one. A take no prisoners sort of approach, and I think that's a good thing. It's an honest document. That's also very important. But I think the key thing is that it now gives the Labor Party an opportunity to draw that line in the sand and to move on with serious new policy development. And also, I believe it gives Anthony Albanese the authority he needs to take the party back to basics. And the basics, of course, are Labor's key values, fairness and equal opportunity for all, and making sure that people have the opportunity to secure meaningful, well-paid work, whether they're living in our capital cities or, just as importantly for me, living in our great regions.
What does it say about some of those headline policies you took to the last election, like negative gearing, like franking credits?
Well, it reminds us that we took too many policies and we managed to confuse and indeed scare the electorate. And I reckon there are many people out there that didn't understand our policies and took a lesson from Scott Morrison by just playing it safe and going with the bloke who was promising to change nothing at all. Now, changing nothing at all, of course, is easy, but it's not what we need at a time when we live in a rapidly changing global economy. I think people do want change. They want imagination and creativity from their governments, but most of all, they want a Labor Party which is absolutely committed to families and their ability to live a comfortable living, their capacity to own their own home, and of course their ability to secure meaningful and well-paid work.
So was it mostly the message, not so much the policies?
Look, it's a combination of all those things, and I think the report makes that very, very clear. And I think very importantly too, there's a sense of mea culpa about the report, an admission that we got a few things wrong, if not many things wrong, and an implied apology to the Australian people that we missed an opportunity to become the government and therefore to pursue on their behalf those things that are underpinned by Labor's core values.
The message also is, I guess, a little less clear about what Labor should do now in terms of specific policies taken to the next election. You've made some suggestions when it comes to climate change. Do you have any more to make this morning?
Well, I'm really pleased the report talks about rural and regional Australia and focusing more on rural and regional people. Of course, it identifies the need to get back to our base and to be more supportive of our blue-collar workers, those who work in coal mining and power generation and in our manufacturing sector. The truth is, and it's a difficult truth, but we creeped a little bit too far to the left. During the election campaign, we talked too much about, those things that interest people living in our capital cities most, when we should have been equally talking about the things that matter most to people living in rural and regional Australia. And that's basically talking about the aspirations of our blue-collar base and ensuring they understand that the Labor Party does support the coal mining industry, manufacturing industries, and all those jobs that flow from those industries in a secondary sense.
Well, how do you do that now, Joel Fitzgibbon? You're really at the coalface, pardon the pun, in your electorate in the Hunter region. You've already made a suggestion about what Labor's emissions target should be. That was howled down by some within your own party. So where do you see this middle ground?
I'll keep prosecuting the idea that we should seek to reach a settlement on the issue of carbon. We've been arguing about it for much more than a decade. And of course, each year, as we sit in opposition, Scott Morrison continues to allow emissions to rise year on year, indeed every year since they repealed our former carbon architecture in the parliament. So, we need to hold him to account. We need to embrace strategies that put sufficient pressure on Scott Morrison to reverse that growth and to start driving emissions down. We can't afford, after now more than 6 years of rises, we can't afford as a party to sit back feeling good about ourselves because we have a more aspirational target, while he just continues for another 3 years to push emissions further up.
Well, it's jobs v the environment. It simply comes down to that at the next election. We're seeing another example of that, I guess, knocking up against each other in Victoria this morning as well, with Daniel Andrews basically making a decision to end native old growth forest logging in Victoria. What do you think about that kind of an announcement? Is that an example, once again, of Labor at a state level not getting it?
Well, I take you back to Anthony Albanese's speech last week in Perth, where he managed to change the conversation about the environment and to talk about it through the prism of opportunity rather than just challenge. And back on carbon, of course, he made the point that there are many opportunities that flow from real and meaningful action on climate change. He made the point again that it takes 200 tonnes of metallurgical coal to make one wind turbine, for example. And it's the same in forestry too. We have to be creative and innovative. We took a policy to the last election which would have removed a dumb thing called the water rule, which only allows you to plant pine plantations in areas where there's not enough rain for them to grow. So simple things like that can be adjusted so we can transition away from native forestry into plantation. And the Victorian government, I note, has an arrangement, as I understand it, with the paper manufacturer down there to ensure that no jobs will be lost in that sector while that transition is underway. Now, I say to Scott Morrison, work with us to abolish the water rule and to put in place other policies which will bring forward investment in the plantation sector, and in doing so, we'll be creating a lot of jobs and storing a hell of a lot of carbon.
Just quickly on the drought, what do you think of the government's announcement yesterday?
Well, I'm obviously very disappointed. It's loans, more loans, rebadged loans. You know, farmers don't want more debt, and they don't have time to be shuffling debt. We wanted a national drought plan, something we began to construct back in 2012, but a process that Tony Abbott and Barnaby Joyce stopped in its tracks when they abolished the COAG committee. But what they really needed to do yesterday is mea culpa, say sorry, and to stop cutting farmers off income support in the middle of the worst drought in our history. By June of next year, they will have cut off 1,800 desperate farming families. Scott Morrison yesterday should have admitted his mistake and made a commitment to restore people and not take any more farming families off farm household support while ever this drought is ongoing.
Joel Fitzgibbon, appreciate your time this morning.
A pleasure.